Live.
Hello, everybody. My name is Joe Sims, and welcome to this special edition of This Week with the Communist Party. I'm here with Scott Hiley, our regular, and also the chairman of the Communist Party, John Bachtell. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Joe. Hi, John.
Hey, John.
Hi, everybody.
So, what do you think? Do you either of you have a prediction as to, let's start with you, John, as to how the night's going to turn out in the House and in the Senate?
Oh, well, I think it'll be a mixed victory. I think that the Democrats are going to take the House. I think that's where the trend is headed. Perhaps not as big as maybe we had hoped, but we'll see. The night is still yet very young. It does look like they are not going to take the Senate. And there were a couple key defeats there, including Joe Donnelly.
That was Indiana,
which was, I think, for some it might have been a surprise, but the extent of that defeat, I think, was unfortunate. But we'll see. I think it's still, they're still early to a certain extent, but I do think that it does, we can kind of see the terrain that we're going to have to fight on now. The other thing that's important is that it looks like there's a number of governors, Democratic governors who have won, including here in Illinois, J.B. Pritzker.
That's going to be really, really important. So, Scott, what do you think? Do you agree with John?
Yeah, I mean, I think whatever comes out of it, it's not going to be the victory that we want or the victory maybe that we need, but it's going to be the victory we get. It looks like Democrats retaking the House and possibly losing ground in the Senate. But I think the important thing to point out, as well as the level of mobilization around this race was different. So even in races where we thought we maybe could win and don't, it's important to keep in mind.
So what you're saying is that there won't be a blue tsunami, but there will still be a blue wave, or is the wave now a eddy in the thing? Or is it your sense that it's still too early to tell?
I think too early to tell, but I'm not
too early to tell. Speaking about the mobilization, this is the Communist Party, and one of the things that we're interested in is how the working class and the trade unions responded. John, you've been working in Illinois for a while. How does it look in your neck of the woods in terms of what the labor movement and how the workers are responded?
Oh, I think the labor movement did everything it could. I mean, it was a massive operation.
Massive.
Not only here in Illinois, but all across the country. And they really reached, really made an effort to mobilize their members, and including, a number of trade unionists who actually ran, who are probably going to win tonight.
Let's hope so. Now, Scott, you're in upstate New York in a small town. Any sense of what the labor movement did there and how the working class responded to the midterms?
There's not a super strong or visible organized labor presence in my town. I know there were some labor people working on the campaign that I was involved in, the campaign to elect Tracy Matrano in the 23rd district. In terms of the working class, what impressed me was the consistency of the messaging from the Democratic candidate on workers' issues, and partly that's because she is a progressive and pro-worker Democrat, but also I think that the national kind of political tenor is shifting, and workers' issues are coming to the fore.
Was the main thing healthcare?
Healthcare was huge, and also the issue of making businesses responsible stakeholders in communities, not just in it for profits, but also having some duty to their workers in the communities where they operate, which is I think a big deal.
Very much a big deal. Now, John, I know that you've been involved in some canvassing over the last couple of months. Any comparison to 2016 in your experience in terms of how people are responding to the door knocking and the phone calls?
Well, I've been working in, one of the suburban districts to Chicago, where there is a real possibility of unseating at least two Republican incumbents. And these are these kind of suburban districts that everybody talks about all across the country, where there's been a shift. These are districts that Hillary Clinton won. I think there are about 30 of them all across the country. And these are also districts that the Democratic Party had more or less abandoned for a long, long time, and didn't really have much of a presence in. And so they're kind of this is, I think, it's a big deal. Even if they don't win, it's an important it's an important development that they're even that close. But I think that Democratic Party will probably end up winning at least one of them, including where there's an African-American nurse who's running, Lauren Underwood, in one of these suburban districts. We'll have to see.
Now, let me ask you a question. Now, we talk about the working class, and as Marxists, but we don't look at the working class narrowly. And one of the big issues that has come about in this election cycle has been Trump's sexism and the response of the women's movement, right? So I'm just wondering, Scott, in your area, did you see a lot of involvement of women
Absolutely.
at a new level?
Yeah, I mean, almost all of the campaign in the town where I did most of my work was organized by women who had formed kind of a group around the 2016 elections and had just kind of kept in touch with one another, and then flipped into election mode, for these midterms. And so I'm not in one of these suburban districts. I'm in a very small rural town, heavily Republican dominated. And what I saw talking to people while canvassing was that of the people who were most interested in the campaign, they tended to be women.
Wow. And what about where you are, John? Same kind of experience?
Oh yeah, and this is, again, in these suburban districts, this is where Trump is losing among women voters, particularly white women voters who are been breaking away from the Republican Party. We'll see how big that was, but the pre-election polls, indicated that there was probably going to be the biggest gender gap of any election going back, I don't know how long, maybe since the beginning of, when they were doing these kinds of polling.
And for good reason. And speaking of women, Joelle Fishman, who is the chair of our political action committee, is supposed to join us. She said she was going to have to call in, so hopefully she still will before the end of the program. So let's just shift the topic a little bit, and just in terms of the impact of this victory. We don't know whether it's going to be an eddy or a wave. We're not thinking a tsunami, but will it be enough, John, to blunt the politics and policies of the White House? I guess that's something that's on everybody's mind. What's your take?
Well, if the Democrats do retake the House, as I think is expected, it's certainly going to the Democrats will certainly be able to block legislation, that comes through the House that's initiated by the Trump administration and the Republican leadership in the Senate.
Hmm.
They won't be able to do anything about the judges, though. That's the big, that's of course a big problem.
The federal judges are confirmed by the Senate, right?
Right.
Hmm.
But what's also important too is that if in a number of states, if there are Democratic governors and legislatures that are elected, which I think there will be, then the possibilities for expanding the Affordable Care Act, Medicaid and so forth, is a real possibility.
Well, that's going to be really important in meeting that demand. I was just wondering, after this election, um, what happens tomorrow and next week in terms of what are the next big issues that are before the Democratic and the People's Movement? Will it be? I mean, what comes next in terms of the fight back and the resistance to the Trump administration? Any sense of that, John?
Well, from what I understand, that at least on the level of the Democratic Party, they're planning on, if they do in fact win the House majority, they intend on advancing a program dealing with infrastructure and jobs,
Mm-hmm.
and also transparency in terms of governing
Mm.
and cleaning up, election financing
Mm.
law and stuff. So if these laws are passed, then it does put the onus then on Trump and the Republicans. But again, I think it's going to be a basis to wage the struggle, over the next 2 years. This is going to be a really difficult struggle. One of the things that we have to, really confront is the fact that, Trump and the Republicans ran on an anti-immigrant racist message, and
Oh
these
my God, it was terrible.
very outrageous racist ads that they were putting out, particularly the last days of the campaign, they were effective in mobilizing a certain section of the American people, and we can't, you can't
Can't ignore that.
including you know uh, taking this fight into the so-called red states and red districts. This fight has to be waged in the movements in the first place, labor movement, but all the movements and the Democratic Party have to build infrastructure in all these states. Can't avoid it.
Now, what about where you are, Scott? You're in the red district, mainly Republican.
Yep.
What issues do you think will galvanize people in the next period?
In my district, healthcare certainly. I think nationally, just kind of responding to your previous question, in states that where Democrats gain ground and have some power, I think we're going to see a lot more attention to voting rights, and I think that's something that the left very broadly absolutely has to push for hard over these next 4 years, making sure, first of all, that everybody gets the right to vote, but also expanding that, including a path to citizenship and immigration policy, and really, really, really mobilizing around automatic voter registration. There are all sorts of ballot initiatives from what I've read that are really gaining bipartisan support that I think could provide a really solid basis for moving forward, advancing democracy, and even, moving toward this decisive defeat of the far right, beyond just, flipping a few seats in Congress, but actually breaking their power.
Now, let me ask, there's one of the big issues is the broader movement, right? And the women's movement has called for a march in January, right? To commemorate the march 2 years ago when Trump was elected. Don't you think that those kinds of events are going to be important with respect to keeping the movement going and keeping pressure on the political parties to making sure that
Absolutely. And just keeping the organization, like so many people came together. And I suspect, or the case in my area anyway, was there was a lot of kind of organization, wasn't spontaneous, but it came together very purposefully for this election. And now after the election, it's going to have to make that transition to a new mode of action. And I think, yeah, events like the Women's March and other kinds of campaigns like that are going to be key to doing that.
Okay, well, look, we're going to have to bring this to an end. We've been going for 17, 18 minutes now. We don't want to wear out our welcome. Any parting shots, John, before we end with regard to the Communist Party's outlook going forward after tonight's election results come in?
Well, we are going to continue to struggle. I mean, that's the, this doesn't change it. This changes things, but the struggle has to continue. And we have I think a different kind of basis. By the way, there's all kinds of, candidates being elected that are coming out of these movements.
That's right.
Not only among women and African-American women and others. These are real fighters. And so this, along with the big demonstrations and these new elected officials, we're going to carry on a real fight.
And one of the movements is the movement of the left, of the Marxist left, is the Communist Party. Here's my Communist Party card. And we invite everybody who, I got two things. I got my Communist Party card and I got my Communist cup. This is one from the Morning Star in the UK. The card is not quite free. You got to pay dues, but we hope you join and make a little contribution. And hey, if you want a cup, write to us at cpusa@cpusa.org, and we'll see what we can do. But we want to invite Scott, show your card. We want to invite you to join the Communist Party tonight, because in order for us to build this movement and the way it ought to be built, we need a bigger and better and stronger Communist Party. John got his card too. That's 3 cards in a row. How many times have you seen that? 3 in a row. That must be, if we were playing poker, we might be in hand. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. And we'll be back on Friday at 10:30 for this week with the Communist Party, and we'll have fuller election results. We'll make sure Joel and some other comrades are there with us as well, so that we can have another go round. So thanks a lot, John.
Okay, good night.
And we'll see you tomorrow. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Joe. Good night, John.
Good night.